Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Armineh Soorenian. I am the researcher for a project conducted by ALFI, Alliance for Research Education, funded by the Disability Research on Independent Living and Learning. The project looked at the effectiveness of accessibility plans on secondary schools in terms of implementing reasonable adjustments.
Armineh, this is the sign language interpreter. Please, could you go slower? Thank you very much.
Yeah, so the project looked at the effectiveness of accessibility plans in terms of implementing reasonable adjustments. The project was conducted by ALFI, Alliance for Education, and funded by Disability Research on Learning and Living and Learning. Now, what are accessibility plans? Or to you?
Hello there, I'm Armineh's support worker and I'll be sort of reading the rest of the presentation going forward. Could we have the next slide, please? Okay, what are accessibility plans? Since the Special Educational Needs and Disability Act 2001, a legal requirement has been in place obligating schools to produce written documents called accessibility plans. In principle, school accessibility plans are required to focus on the following key areas. 1, increasing access for disabled pupils and students to the school curriculum, and this covers teaching, learning, assessment, and any after-school activities. 2, improving access to the physical environment. This covers adjustments to the built environment and also physical aids for accessing education. And 3, improving the delivery of written information to disabled learners. Any written information, such as handouts and timetables, should take account the access needs and preferred formats of pupils, students, and parents, and should be made available in a reasonable timeframe. To learn what disabled young people, their parents, and educational professionals think about accessibility plans, Armineh used a range of research methods and will now go over some of the findings from the research project. Could we have the next slide, please? Okay, this is regarding information. Even though improving delivery of written information is one of the key areas that accessibility plans are required to focus on, participants' accounts of this service were variable depending on which group they belonged to.
Slow down, please, slow down.
Yes, sorry. Disabled young participants generally agreed that the provision of accessible information was poor. Likewise, parents were disappointed. When asked about the ways that they found the relevant information, parent participants revealed their strategies had included scouring the school website, hoping I haven't missed anything, only by word of mouth or purely by chance. And they also said, we don't always find out the relevant information in time. For the most part, the professionals did not take responsibility for this shortcoming themselves or assign responsibilities to their institutions. Instead, they felt that factors such as a lack of funding and insufficient uptake by pupils had a greater part to play. Next slide, please. Admission. In terms of admissions, disabled young people and their parents were not only denied support and transparent information, but in most cases, they were confronted with prejudicial and negative attitudes from staff. The following is one example of a parent facing attitudinal barriers. The first one I went to, which was our catchment school, the head teacher there said just basically, well, we've got an additional resources base for children with, additional needs. And she just assumed that my daughter would have to be not integrated into the mainstream class, but would have to be in a unit in the school. So I didn't like that because I thought, actually, you're just making an assumption about her ability to integrate without really knowing very much about it. She wasn't interested really in telling me what the mainstream classes were doing. Such attitudinal barriers mean that disabled young people and their parents do not get to exercise their right to choose which school they attend and may be forced to homeschool. In contrast, the professionals participating in the field study did not recognize or acknowledge any of the barriers that disabled learners or their families described when it came to admissions. Next slide, please. Access. All of the participants of the project pointed out very similar physical access barriers to inclusion within their schools. Some parents also additional highlighted additional sensory barriers faced by their children, as described here. When we think of accessibility, a lot of people think of the physical. They don't think about the children, like my daughter, who will miss the social cues, or if something is too loud, the tension and frustration will build up and up. She won't realize it, but she'll be anxious because it's too noisy, or there's too many people. There's too much going on, or something smells funny, or there's a noise that makes them want to run away. She says, I just want to escape. I think it's the social thing that schools missed most. Access is often perceived by schools and education authorities as relating almost entirely to pupils with physical impairments, rendering those with learning and sensory impairments invisible and putting them at an unfair disadvantage. Next slide, please. Teaching, learning and assessment. In relation to teaching, learning and assessment, the disabled young participants felt that no level playing field existed in respect of their ability to participate in classroom activities and the school curriculum, particularly when it came to assessments. One disabled pupil explained how he was at a disadvantage during lessons compared with his peers. I had to explain, but I wasn't actually given anything to try and catch up, to the point where I didn't even know what I was meant to be doing at that class, because I had done all the work before that. They didn't tell me what to do next, and it caused panic to build up and panic and panic and panic, but I never got the chance to finish it. So because of that, I think I failed the entire assignment. And because of that, right now, as it stands, I failed nearly every assignment I've had to do because I haven't been explained it completely. And I've done about 3 or 4. So yeah, it's now got to the point where I'm nearly panicking every day because of it, which is not good. But there's nothing I can do about it because the staff don't understand. Education professionals, for their part, felt an effective and fully implemented accessibility plan would be a useful tool in promoting and ensuring equality in teaching. Next slide, please. Social inclusion. The disabled young study participants reported that they were generally denied full participation in their school community and faced a number of daily barriers, including prejudicial attitudes, inadequate transport facilities, lack of trained staff during social time, limited finance, and inaccessible school activities. Situations like this led to disabled young people feeling isolated and shut out. In addition, many disabled young people experience theft, assault and battery, and intimidation, often masked behind the more generic term of bullying, even though this could certainly be categorized as hate crimes against disabled people. Professional field study participants, when discussing the issue of community in schools, conceded that positive practices to help disabled children's social inclusion were ad hoc and inconsistent. Next slide, please. Conclusion. All of the participants taking part in this project agreed that any accessibility plan would be completely ineffective in driving inclusive education if the content of the plan was not firmly embedded into school practice. The majority of parents felt that no matter how well written an accessibility plan might be, if a school lacked the drive to adhere to the plan and develop its culture according to the principles of equality and inclusion, then the plan would be nothing but a worthless piece of paper. The reality for most disabled young people does not correspond with the rhetoric contained in schools' written accessibility plans. Disabled young people and their parents are given little or no information regarding the existence of the plans. By failing to successfully publicize accessibility plans, schools are in very real danger of non-compliance with the Special Educational Needs and Disability Act 2001, as well as the Equality Act 2010. Furthermore, there is a legal requirement in place for schools to continually increase the accessibility of their settings for disabled young people over time. Accessibility plans are not currently routinely monitored for their impact or compliance with legislation. The full report sets out a list of recommendations not only for the removal of physical barriers in schools, but also for challenging attitudinal, systemic, and other obstacles within the mainstream school environment to finally put an end to segregation and silencing of voices. The full report can be found at www.alfie.org.uk/resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Armineh, and your support worker. And I think that's a real eye-opener, isn't it? Because here we are, 18 years, schools, in fact, they had to do it by 2003, 17 years, they've had to have these in place, review them every year and revise them every 3 years. And yet you find this last year this was your research found this result. And it's not really surprising that large numbers of disabled pupils and their parents are finding that mainstream is not accommodating them and are voting with their feet, not really for what is best for them, but as refugees from the mainstream. Nevertheless, 90% of disabled school pupils are still in the mainstream. So this issue has to be addressed by government, and part of our campaign this month will be to get every school to look for their access plans, revise them, and start putting pressure on the responsible body, that's the governors or the trust, to actually do something about it. Thank you very much. So if you can click out, that would be good, Armineh.